Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to show you a quick way to start using Veeqo API to build any kind of integrations, and this video is going to save you a lot of time so that you can start using Veeqo API directly without getting lost in their huge API documentation. So first off, the Veeqo API is a REST based API, and it uses JSON to send and receive data from API, and secondly, Veeqo support both uh, basic authentication along with OAuth 2.0 authentication. So both options are available. But in this video, I'm going to show you integration using basic authentication, which is API keys. And the reason is that when I tried to register an application, OAuth application via their developer portal, I was not able to do that because their developer portal was giving some kind of error, right? So I'm going to use the API keys in this tutorial. So let's get started by first generating API key. So I'm going to log in into my Weco account here. And once I'm logged in, I'm going to go to settings. And in the settings section, you can see a section named users. In the user section, you can see there are lots of different users already created. So if you want, you can create a new user, entirely new user to assign a API key, or you can also use any existing user to take the API key and use it into your application. So I'm going to use existing user, and let's just scroll down here. You can see the API key is already there. Let's copy it, and let's go back to the API documentation. And before we start making the API calls, let me give you a quick good practice while generating the API key. So let's say if you are planning to have multiple integrations that are going to use the Weco API, I would suggest to create different users and use different API keys that belongs to different users for those applications, because it can help you to troubleshoot or debug any issues that you face in the future. Because if the applications are using different API keys, there are going to be different logs for API logs for different applications. So it will help you in debugging or if any issues arises in the future. So yeah, so that's about the best practices of using the API key of Veeqo. Next, so now we have copied and generated the API key. Now what we can do is that we need to start making some API calls, and I'm also going to give you a basic introduction of how you can make those API calls and generate the code that you can use in your production application. Okay, so let's head over to the orders part of the API documentation. And as you can see, here are different endpoints available. First endpoint is to get the list of orders. So let's give this system a try. And before we give it a try, let me tell you, the Weco API is having a very handy tool, which the tool is itself contained in their API documentation. So you can go to their API documentation, click on the endpoint you want to give it a try, and then click on switch to console. So this is a very handy tool that helps you to simulate the API calls to Weco. So let's try this order endpoint where we want to get a list of orders of a particular Weco account. So in order to make this call, you first have to paste your API key that we generated few steps before into this header, and then once you have pasted it over there, you need to click on call resource. And I'm going to use the production because I'm having a production account, and I'm just going to make a read API call, which is not going to alter any data inside the Weco. So let's click on it. Okay, as you can see, we just made an API call, and here we got some headers in response, right? Along with that, if you can see by scrolling below, you have got the response back, which includes all the order details that are in my account, right? So this is how you can start making API calls to different endpoints of Weco. Now, there is another very good thing about this API simulation tool that they have in their API documentation, and that is that you can generate the API code in whatever language you want. So let's say if you are developing an API application using Python, you can click on show code examples and you can select the language to Python, and here you go. You have your production ready code generated. I mean, definitely you will need to refactor the code and modify it a little bit according to your needs, but this code is pretty much enough to get you started with your application. So yeah, so that's how you can get started with Veeqo's API. And there are some more points that I would like to quickly cover before ending this video, which is like when you click on switch to example, what you can see is that there are different parameters that you can pass at their endpoint as a query parameters. So you can pass since ID, that is like you use this to get a order after that particular order number. And there are also some other useful filters like created after, updated at, page size. So let's say if you want to get large number of results within a single API call, you can extend this parameter, and you can again add those parameters right from here, right? Let's say so sorry, this was the header section, so you need to go to URL parameters here, and as you can see, all these details are already here. All the available filters are here. You can adjust the filters according to your needs and just call your resource, generate the code, and you are ready to roll. So that's how you can get quickly started using the Veeqo's API. But one more important thing I would like to mention, like whenever you are using the code generated from their API simulator tool, you might need to have some uh, libraries installed inside, or modules, I would say, installed in your production code. For example, in this Python code, there is a URL lib2 library being used to make the APIs call. So you can simply get it installed before you want to use this code, or whatever respective library you want to get installed with the language that you are using. So you can have that installed to make use of this code. So that's how it's going to work. And there is one more thing which I would like to cover, which is about the API rate limitations. So because API rate limitations are very important while developing an application, to make sure like you are making the calls which are not overloading the target system, and you are receiving the data that you want. So Weco API uses leaky bucket algorithm, which allows you to send 5 requests per second, and they have a maximum limit of 100 requests. So let's say if you exceed uh, you know 5 API calls per second, and you sent more than 5 API calls, and for example, if you sent like 100 API calls within a few seconds, so after that, uh, after the, let's say if you sent like 100 or more than 100 requests, after sending that much of request, you might start getting error, because Weco API is having a bucket size of 100 requests at the max. So until Weco process those first 100 requests, you won't be able to queue up more API calls, because Weco API process 5 requests per second. So to be on the safer side, I would say like uh, that you do not send like more than 4 API calls per second, because sometimes APIs also takes API calls take some time to get processed from the target platform. So yeah, so that was pretty much pretty much it about this API, Weco API. And if you are looking to develop any API integration using Weco, and you don't want to get into the nitty gritty details of the Weco API, you can reach out to us on our email, which is sales@constructcloud.com, or you can also visit our website www.constructcloud.com. I have added those um, contact details in the description as well. So that was it. That was all about this Weco API. Thanks for watching.